The most foolish person is the one who takes pride in the immorality of his youth. There are few statements so piercing in their simplicity that they cut through the noise of excuses, justifications, and the arrogance that often masks itself as confidence. This sentence, attributed to Imam Ali as one of those rare, clear mirrors held up to the human heart. It is short, yet it opens a wide field of reflection, on youth and its temptations, on pride and shame, on the consequences of actions, and on the wisdom that comes from humility and self-awareness. What follows is an extended reflection and script built around that thought, a meditation that explores how and why humility matters, why pride in vice is self-destructive, and how a person might move from foolishness toward wisdom. Youth is an intense season. Energy, curiosity, urgency, and possibility surge together. The world seems to offer endless options, and the future glitters tantalizingly just beyond reach. That very intensity can give young people a sense of invulnerability. Mistakes seem temporary, consequences appear distant. There is also the intoxicating idea that one must prove oneself, to peers, to lovers, to society. In some circles, defiance is prized, in others, outrageousness is applauded. And so, in the rush of the moment, the boundary between courage and recklessness blurs. Moral lines that were once clear may seem negotiable, and vice can be dressed up as liberation, rebellion, or identity. It is at this dangerous juncture that pride performs its most devious work. Pride does not merely make someone feel good about themselves, it fortifies their wrongs, converts error into an identity, and transforms vice into a badge of honor. When a person brags about thoughtless speech, abusive conduct, promiscuity, deception, or cruelty, they are doing more than recounting a deed. They are boasting about the erosion of their moral compass. This is what Imam Ali warns against. To take pride in what degrades one's character is to invert values. Weakness is praised as strength, ugliness as charm, and harm as authenticity. The foolish person, then, is not merely the one who errs in youth. After all, to err is human, but the one who enshrines the error, who freezes their growth by wearing their worst actions like a medal. Why is this so self-defeating? Because pride in vice cuts a person off from learning. Growth depends on recognition of error and the humility to repair. When vice becomes a source of pride, learning ends. The mind selects only information that supports the persona of the wrongdoer. Conscience, instead of being a guide toward improvement, becomes silenced or mocked. A person who brags about their worst moments trains themselves to repeat those moments, because repetition reinforces identity. The brain loves coherence. The story you tell about yourself becomes the blueprint for future behavior. If that story is, "I am proud of my misconduct," the future will be built on misconduct. There is also social damage. Pride in immorality corrodes relationships. Friends who once admired a person's charm or humor may be repelled by the cruelty that lies behind boastful tales. Family members feel betrayed. The society around the proud wrongdoer begins to lose trust. In some cases, the very pride the person claims, in defiance or notoriety, is a fragile attempt to cover deep insecurity. The louder the bragging, the more likely it is that self-respect is absent. Respect cannot be built on the heap of other people's hurt. It must be earned through integrity, kindness, and responsibility. People who boast of their misdeeds are often seeking validation in the wrong places, yet the validation they get from co-conspirators is hollow and unstable. If we listen to Imam Ali's wisdom, we find that the antidote to this folly is not simply scolding or guilt, it is cultivated moral courage. Moral courage is the strength to face one's faults honestly and to repair them. It is the decision to refuse the easy applause that comes from momentary transgression, and instead to accept the slower, quieter applause that comes from integrity. Moral courage means apologizing when you have wronged, making amends when possible, and learning so deeply from failure that you refuse to return to it. This transformation requires humility, and humility is not the opposite of pride in general, it is the opposite of pride in vice. Humility in its highest form is not self-abasement, but accurate self-assessment, a courageously honest appraisal of one's faults and gifts, followed by action. Consider the psychological processes involved. Human beings have a primitive need for belonging and status. When belonging can be gained by aligning with a harmful group identity, bragging about misconduct, mocking decency, or celebrating cruelty, the mind calculates a short-term payoff. But the long-term cost is often social isolation, regret, and the disintegration of meaning. A person who builds their identity on transgression might gain fleeting popularity, but that popularity is brittle. It depends on the continued performance of the vice. Once age or circumstance reduces the energy to perform, the person is left with the vacant core of a personality that never held anything enduring. This is the tragedy of selfish pride. From a spiritual perspective, Imam Ali's counsel cuts deeper. Pride in vice is an affront not only to the ethical fabric of human society but also to the dignity of the soul. Spiritual traditions across time have taught that the purpose of life is not to display power but to cultivate virtues, patience, kindness, justice, humility, and mercy. Vice, by definition, is a deviation from those virtues. To boast about vice is to celebrate a deterioration of the soul. Imam Ali, known for his moral seriousness and spiritual insight, reminds us that genuine nobility is found in the mastery of self, not in the domination of others or in reckless abandon. How can a young person or anyone avoid this trap? First, by practicing self-reflection. Regular introspection helps a person notice patterns. When do they act out? Under what social pressures do they brag? What fears are they hiding? Writing, quiet meditation, or honest conversations with a trusted mentor or friend can illuminate these patterns. Second, by creating discipline. Discipline is not a punishment, it's a way to align energy with purpose. Sports, study, prayer, creative work, these structures allow healthy expression of youthful energy. Third, by choosing friends wisely. Peer influence is potent. Surrounding oneself with people who prize integrity, generosity, and courage reduces the temptation to perform vice's identity. There is also a lesson in timing. Youth is not something to be squandered as an excuse to act badly. It is a period of formation, a chance to plant habits that will yield fruit for decades. Those who waste their youth by chaining themselves to harmful behaviors discover later that the debt of reputation and broken relationships is heavy. By contrast, those who use their youthful passion to learn, to build skill, and to serve others find that the same intensity leads to honor in older years. This is a slow wisdom. You must be able to value a future that is not yet visible. But the path away from pride and immorality is not simply individual, it is communal. Families, schools, and communities must resist glamorizing harmful behavior. The media's celebration of fame at any cost, the cultural approval of aggressive masculinity, or the mockery of piety can create environments where vice is admired. Leaders, parents, teachers, religious guides, have a duty to model the opposite, show how strength is found in restraint, how honor lives in keeping promises, how joy is deeper when it is built on empathy. Communities can also rehabilitate those who have fallen into vice, offering them paths back to dignity without shame that isolates them further. Forgiveness, yes, but not the indifferent celebration of the same wrong. To make all this practical, imagine a young man who boasts about his vulgar language and contempt for elders. He thinks it makes him appear fearless. But when he faces a crisis, a parent's illness, a job loss, a public failure, those same people he scorned are the ones who might extend a hand. If his social capital is built on wounded relationships, he will find himself alone when he needs support. If, instead, he had used his boldness to speak truth, defend the weak, and admit mistakes, his boldness would have created a network of loyalty. The real test of character is not how loudly one can shout in adolescence, but how one conducts oneself when reputation or convenience suggests otherwise. We must also consider the cultural narratives that give rise to pride in vice. Sometimes societies valorize nonconformity in ways that are ambiguous. Young people may interpret nonconformity as license to reject moral norms outright. The wiser interpretation is to question oppressive norms while embracing universal virtues. Nonconformity that serves justice, compassion, and truth is noble. Nonconformity that serves narcissism or cruelty is not rebellion, it is regression. Imam Ali's statement is not an indictment of youthful freedom, it is a warning against mistaking freedom for the license to harm oneself or others, and against mistaking notoriety for honor. Another important element is the role of narrative and storytelling in shaping identity. The stories people tell about themselves, to themselves and to others, are powerful. A young person who jokes about their cruelty over time starts to see themselves as that cruel person. Rewriting personal narratives requires conscious effort. One can adopt new stories. The story of someone who learns from mistakes, who chooses to apologize, who uses energy to build, not to break. Rituals of accountability, public apologies, community service, consistent change behavior, help rewrite the narrative into one of moral maturation. Imam Ali's words also point to the delicate balance between mercy and justice. When someone brags about vice, the community must neither ignore nor instinctively punish. The response should be rooted in a desire for transformation. If the proud wrongdoer is counseled with firmness and compassion, and if they are given chances to repair, the pride can fracture and humility can grow. But if pride goes unchecked, the person becomes trapped. The wise counsel avoids both enabling and cruel shaming, aiming instead for conversion of heart and habit. At the heart of this teaching is the notion of dignity. A dignified person does not need to humiliate others to feel large. Dignity grows from inner coherence, conscience aligned with action. When a person uses their power to uplift, not to hurt, they become truly noble. Conversely, those who boast about debased conduct are settling for a counterfeit dignity, a fragile, brittle self that collapses easily in the face of genuine challenge. So what does repentance look like in this context? Repentance is more than regret or a momentary apology. It is a sustained turning, a commitment to change patterns, to seek forgiveness where necessary, to restore what can be restored. Repentance requires humility, admitting that the prior pride was wrong. It requires courage, embracing the vulnerability of contrition. It also requires action, showing through consistent behavior, over time, that the change is real. It is tempting to ask, is there room for grace? Can a person who once took pride in vice become an exemplar of virtue later? The answer is yes. History and everyday life are rich with stories of dramatic moral transformations. Many saints, reformers, and leaders began as deeply flawed individuals who later turned their lives around. The crucial element is the willingness to face one's faults honestly and to engage in the slow work of change. Even those who held vice up as a badge can, with sincere effort, be reborn into humility and service. Imam Ali's statement is not a sentence to eternal condemnation, rather, it is an urgent call to wakefulness. Practical steps for anyone seeking to move from foolish pride to wise humility might include the following. Begin with self-examination. Seek honest feedback from trusted people. Create small, concrete daily practices that embody new virtues. Apologize and, where possible, repair harm, and commit to long-term personal formation. Seek mentors who model moral courage. Read moral literature and spiritual writings that inspire. Invest time in practices that slow the self. Prayer, meditation, reflective reading, physical exercise, for the rushed life is fertile ground for prideful performance. This teaching also invites empathy for those who fall. Often, people who take pride in misbehavior are wounded, insecure, or reacting to cruelty done to them. Judge the action, but understand the story. This empathy is not an excuse, rather, it is a means of reaching the person and helping them reform. The community that wishes to heal its members must practice both truth and mercy. In the language of leadership, we might say, confront the behavior, but maintain the connection. The connection is the bridge between the present failure and future growth. Another dimension is the ethical imagination, the ability to see others as fully human and to imagine the consequences of one's acts. When a person brags about harming someone, through words or deeds, they often fail to imagine the lifelong scars they leave. Cultivating ethical imagination is an important antidote. Literature, film, and personal testimony can broaden our capacity to empathize and to see beyond immediate thrills. We should also consider the role of humility as a public posture. In a culture that often prizes self-promotion, humility appears countercultural. Yet humility is not weakness, it is truthfulness. The humble person knows their limits, accepts help when needed, and offers help without fanfare. They understand the fleeting nature of power and fame. By refusing to wear vice as a crown, the humble person models a deeper, quieter form of authority. Finally, Imam Ali's exhortation points to the long arc of human life. A single moment of folly need not define a life, but the stories we craft about our moments do. To be praised for youth's transgression is to tie one's present identity to past error. To be proud of immorality is to mortgage your future dignity for the currency of momentary applause. The wiser course is to invest youth's energy in virtues that compound over time: patience, generosity, discipline, and humility. These virtues yield a kind of honor that is durable and real. If this reflection leaves the reader with a single practical takeaway, let it be this: treat your actions as seeds. What you plant in youth, you harvest in later years. If you plant the seed of boastful cruelty or bragging about vice, you will harvest loneliness, regret, and the inability to be truly at peace. If you plant humility, accountability, and service, you will harvest trust, dignity, and a life that others can stand beside. The most foolish person is not the one who errs once, but the one who makes error their identity and crowns themselves with the spoils of vice. Reject that foolishness. Choose to learn, to repair, and to grow. Pride in virtue is strength. Pride in vice is the surest way to become small.